Here's a question for you. Is physician-assisted suicide ever right? When I was in my 20s, my first real heartbreak in the ministry, the true brokenness of heart where I went home and wept, was when I had the responsibility of helping a family walk through the death of their 18-month-old daughter. I remember very well that this little girl went into the hospital just for a sore throat, slipped into a coma, and was lying there with absolutely no life whatsoever. And yet the machines were keeping her alive. The machines were breathing for her. The machines were beating her heart for her. And I watched her young, broken-hearted parents grieving over this little girl, and I was grieving as well. The parents became very tired, very weary, and it was late at night, and I suggested to them that they go home and try to get some rest, and that I would stay with the little girl. And I did. I stayed with her all night, and I prayed over her again and again and again, and I begged God to heal her body. Beautiful little girl. Something that you will always remember once you have seen it. It's imprinted in my brain even to this day, so many years later. And the next morning, when the doctors came in, they were beginning to raise the question of whether or not the machines should be turned off. They were beginning to raise the question of whether or not to pull the plug. And that, in a real sense, is physician-assisted suicide. Although that child is not taking her own life, it is ending a human life, which raises a tremendous ethical question. At what point do we say yes to those things? At what point do we say it is the right thing to do? We've all seen things happen in the news where people were in a coma, sometimes for years, and then they emerge out of the coma, and no one really knows whether or not that thing is going to happen in every case. And so it raises ethical questions of when is someone dead? And I was only in my 20s, and I didn't know the answer to that question. And I got on the phone, and I called a friend of mine who I went to seminary with, whose father was the Surgeon General at that time, Dr. C. Everett Koop. And I called Dr. Koop on the phone, and I spoke with him. Said, what do we have here? What's going on? How do we handle this situation? And his conclusion to me was very simple. He said, when a child's brain is dead, they are dead. When the brain is not receiving any information, they are dead. And all of the medical tests concluded that her brain was dead. And so the decision was made to pull the plug. And we watched that little girl within minutes slip away into the arms of Jesus. Well, now, that is a little girl in a coma, no more than 2 years of age. Is that different than someone who is at the end stage of their life, suffering from horrendous pain, going through things that none of us can really imagine unless we're going through it ourselves? Is it ever right for a doctor to sit down with that patient and conclude that they will help that patient kill themselves? And I say the answer to that question is no. As harsh as that might sound and as merciless as that might sound, that person's brain is still alive. And so they are still alive. And to take a human life at that point is to play God. That's why physician-assisted suicide, although it is becoming more commonplace, although it is becoming more acceptable, nonetheless, it puts that physician and that family into the place of determining life and death matters. Technology has grown significantly, and there are things that doctors can do today that they never even dreamed possible just a few years ago. Technology is advancing significantly, and so we're able to keep people alive more and more and more. And so that's the positive side of technology. The negative side of technology is that raises all kinds of ethical questions as to what is right and what is wrong. And we have to come down as Christians on the point that God is the author of life and that God is the finisher of life. And if Dr. Koop was right, that when the brain is dead, they are dead, that says to me that when the brain is still alive, they're still alive. And we cannot begin to play the role of life and death that only God can possess.